Remix. 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 Remix.
What's up, y'all? Good morning. How are you? It's a weird Wednesday. Welcome
So
to the
weird.
remix. Welcome to the Remix Morning Show. It's me, Jackie Lukman, joined by Clau O'Brien Moscoso. You know who's missing. You notice who's missing, right? I don't know what's happening, but here we are, and we're going to make the best of this because we are the Remix Morning Show, and this is what we do. It's what is today? Wednesday, November 26th. It is Women's Wednesday, and I don't know what's it looking like where you are, Cloud, because here in DC it is gray, it is chilly, it's drizzly, it's
Yeah.
November. It's finally winter, I guess.
Yeah. No, similar. I'm in Jersey now in Kearney. Shout
So
out
it's even darker.
it's even darker. Shout out to Sopranos. um, but yeah, man, I'm so depressed. I got back from sunny Guayaquil, even though I was there a little longer than intended. Regardless, for whatever
Mm.
reason, it was lovely there, and now I'm back on the plantation. Shitty weather.
Mm.
I don't like it.
Yeah, it's never good to return to this place. Like every time I traveled somewhere else, like when I came back from China earlier this year, oh my God, that was the worst 13 hours on a plane.
Mm,
Because it just, the closer I got to this place, the angrier and more depressed I got.
yeah, yeah.
It's just the worst. Same with when I went to Venezuela, same with Cuba. Every time I go to Colombia, it's like, oh God, can I just please,
Yeah.
can I just please camp out in your extra room?
No, exactly.
Yeah, so that's the reality until we can fix this place and make it something worth coming back to,
Mm-hmm.
I
Mm-hmm.
guess.
Mm-hmm.
Because it is this we are, I feel like we're living in Nero era Rome.
Mm-hmm.
Only we're what's going on in this country is it like Rome's debauchery pales in
Yeah, yeah.
comparison to what is. I mean, the only thing that I think the collapse of Rome pales or surpasses the collapse of the American empire with is like the personal violence and the violent depravity of the emperors. Like, okay, we're not seeing somebody like Nero um use people as human torches. That I
Yes.
don't know how to do. I don't know how to describe that any other way with that. Like, yes, what Trump is disgusting. He's a disgusting, just evil, selfish, narcissistic, the megalomaniac. Yep, absolutely true. But he's not like doing gladiator games and having people mauled to death, mauled alive to death by wild animals for entertainment to distract people from the fact that the empire was indeed collapsing under its own weight. We're not seeing that kind of stuff. But what we are seeing is like a widespread, large scale escalation, not introduction of something new, but
Mm-hmm.
like an escalation and a laying bare of the true nature of the level of human degradation that has been going on for decades under every administration. Like people are 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 rightfully upset and afraid at ICE and their deputized white supremacist extremists doing the things they're doing in the way they're doing them.
Yeah.
But we keep having to remind people that these ICE raids, the only thing new are the deputized white supremacists. That's the only thing new. And you know,
Even with that I mean the 287G program
oh,
did that,
that's true.
you
That's
know, so
true. I forgot
even
about that. That's
that
true.
not like it's not entirely accurate. Like what we are seeing is, so I remember, I mean, I had a home raid and like I had just graduated high school in
Wow.
2004.
Hmm.
This was under Bush, right?
Mm.
And my dad and inevitably went back after that. He self-deported because he didn't want to be in a detention center
God.
and not have access to his medication.
Mm.
So, you know, he did that, but, you know, the rest of us stayed. I don't know if that was a good choice or not, but here we are. um,
I mean, but
but
what a choice to have to make, though.
right, exactly,
That's
exactly.
like it, and for, so like for me, like whether somebody chose to stay or leave because they didn't want to live under the fact that they are having to make that choice because
Right.
this is the policy and this has been so like that's repulsive. But the fact that your family experienced this phenomenon, this treatment, and face the option of self-deporting, then under Bush, this is
Right,
this is what we
right.
keep saying.
It's
These
not new.
things are not new. This is
Mhm.
what these people have been doing, and
Yep.
Obama didn't stop it. As a matter of fact, Obama increased funding for
Hmm.
ICE
Hmm.
like by what was it, 300%?
Yeah, and I mean, he still holds the record for deporter in chief.
Yes. Trump is still salty because he is not able to deport as many people
Right.
as Obama deported. Like that, we're missing that, and we're really hyper focusing on how violent and how nasty the way Trump is doing these things are. And we're missing that these things have been done for a long time. He's just doing them in an extra nasty way. And why do we keep saying that? Because if our focus is we've got to get rid of Trump right now, he has to go right now. And I'm not arguing that he doesn't.
Mhm.
Sure, he does. But when he's gone, whether it's right now or next month or, next year, because I can't say in the next 4 years, because I don't think he's gonna last the whole term. But that's conjecture. But even if he does go, whenever that is, what are we going to do about the policies, the practices, the institutional rules, and the system that has carried out these actions, these policies long before Trump came along, that Democrats also supported, that if they come into power after Trump is gone, they're not going to overturn any of these policies that allowed these things to happen. They're going to go back to doing these things in the nice way
Yeah.
that they had been doing. And they weren't even nice then. They were
Right.
just not publicized.
Right. Yeah, I mean, when we think about the like increase in using even just detention centers, right? It does start from, I mean, honestly, hell, Guantanamo Bay was being used to detain Haitians in the 90s, right? This is not,
Mhm.
again, this is like really not new, right? But even when you think about other aspects, right? Like, so this is just like immigration is a great example of how the duopoly just kind of build on top of one another, right? And like further their objectives as the crisis of imperialism, which pushes migration, heightens the migration crisis, increases and deportations and detention centers increased, right? Um, I just dropped an article. I just published an article in Black Agenda Report on a different topic about the Lima Group and the escalatory war moves against Venezuela. But in a similar fashion, starts off from the Bush administration and the CIA being a part of that first coup in 2002 that Chavez, well, the people of Bolivia, or the Bolivarian people rather, reverse in, I think, something like 46 hours, not like barely, right? But that the moves to get rid of the Bolivarian Revolution continue, right? The Lima Group is one example of this sort of ad hoc group that really had no international body or no standing of an international body, but still imposed really severe draconian sanctions, and they called it peaceful transition, right? The Lima Group was always talking about we want to see regime change in Venezuela, but we want to do it peacefully. This peaceful, so-called peaceful transition did result in the deaths of 40,000 Venezuelans, right? So I don't know how peaceful we're talking about here, right? But this is one example of the liberal sort of orientation, but still trying to meet the same objectives, right? So what we see now with Operation Southern Spear and the Trump administration and Secretary of War Hegseth really just encircling Venezuela from all sides is maybe just like the outright fascist approach to the same objective, right? So I think similarly we might say that with immigration raids, with detention centers, et cetera, it's similarly mask off moment, right? Because as capitalism crumbles and right, fascism is what the state has to use in order to maintain that system, right? So we see this is just what we're seeing, right? It's the inevitable or development of these things.
Yeah, and I mean that situation in Venezuela, it fascinated me to learn how much I didn't know about the coup in 2002, and it really opened my eyes to realizing how much we don't know about still about the United States government and the way they interfere in other countries' governments all over the world, and how they're still doing it. Like, I went to Venezuela in 2022, so that was the 20th anniversary of the reversal of the 2020 the 2002 coup. And I went because they were having, and I think they do this every year, every few years, an international conference against fascism. And that year they were commemorating the 20th anniversary of the reversal of the 2002 coup. So the conference was focused on alternative media. This was back in 2022 now, where the Venezuelan government and civil society celebrated and really retold the history of how the people reversed the coup. Now, this was in 2002, before this was before smartphones. This was before widespread use of the internet. This was before all of that. So there was cable news and the radio, right? And that's it. And this was also Venezuela. So this was not a country that was technologically like advanced. You know what I mean? So their communication system was not anything unusual. It wasn't, they didn't have anything advanced. They just had the television and cable network, like everybody else did. They didn't have any special, communications. There were radio stations, but they're state radio stations. And that's great because this is the Bolivarian state. But during that coup, the right wing, backed by the United States, took over the television stations, and they had their agents on the morning news shows because everybody gets up early. Like the global South, these folks get up at like 5 o'clock in the doggone morning. And there are the earliest rising people probably in the world. And I think Comrade Jambu always says that Colombia are the earliest rising people in the world. And I'm like, that's nothing to brag about. Y'all need to go to sleep. But I mean, people get up very, very early, and they love watching their news. And the right wing is on the morning news shows talking about, all of them talking about how there's a new government, there's a new president, and everything is going to be great now. And people are, drinking their morning coffee, having their morning bread. Like, what you mean, new president? Donde está Chavez? Where is Chavez? So this whole thing, and they didn't know that the night before Chavez had been kidnapped and he was being held in an undisclosed location. I guess the United States was the right wing was trying to coordinate with the United States what to do with him, whether they were going to put him on a plane and send him somewhere, or whether they were going to, so they are kind of waiting for orders, trying to figure out what to do. And in the meantime, the people of Venezuela are talking to each other now. After the news programs are like, there's a new government and all this kind of stuff. Now the people of Venezuela, who just voted on their own constitution, they rewrote the constitution from the right-wing US-backed government, that the people wrote the Bolivarian constitution. So they were very, very invested in their government. They knew what they voted for. So they're talking to each other now. Like, well, did you see what they said on the news? Where the heck is Chavez? What is going on? And they begin to develop what became a community communications network, people's communications networks. And they had what were those daguerreotypes, the manual copy machines, the one that you crank that smelled like that everybody got high on with the smell. With the chemical smell. They had that. They had walkie-talkies. They had community radio stations. But then they found out that the right wing had even taken over the state radio stations. So once the people gathered together, realized that a coup was taking place, that their president, who they elected, had been kidnapped, the people got together and created this network where they communicated with all of the people in Venezuela, told them what was happening, and said, we need to go down to Miraflores, to the presidential palace, and find out where our president is. And that is where, and this is like the only pictures that I remember us seeing in the United States during that time, because there were very, very few. There was little news coverage about this coup and the reversal of the coup in the United States, because the reversal happened so fast that the US couldn't even come up with a narrative to explain all those Venezuelans in the streets demanding where Chavez was. They couldn't, the people acted so fast that the US, the CIA, Mossad, and all of their agents could not come up with a lie fast enough to cover what the people did to reverse the thing that they never wanted to admit that they did, which was attempt to coup Hugo Chavez. Because those people, when I went to Venezuela, they have a whole museum dedicated to the reversal of this coup. So you get the whole story about who was involved, about who in Washington was involved. They have news footage of um, Colin Powell and other U.S. officials talking about how evil Hugo Chavez was, and how he's a dictator, and how he needs to be overthrown because he's denying democracy in Venezuela, and the people are suffering, and the people are like, we wanted him. This is our revolution. We kicked you out. So you see, when you go through this museum in Venezuela, and this really did blow my mind, Cloud. I had never seen anything like it. You see the full context of the people pressing the gates of Miraflores, because here in the United States, that's all that was shown, without any audio, without any context, other than, oh, there's a protest in Venezuela against the government. That's what I remember being said on the news here. But what was really happening was the people of Venezuela found out that the U.S. had tried to coup. They had kidnapped Chavez, and they wanted him back. So they went to the presidential palace, and they demanded of the military, of the Venezuelan military guarding the palace, you show us where he is, because you should be ashamed of yourselves. You are Venezuelan. You are us. And this is where you see in that picture, if you remember, people holding up little books and like waving them in the faces of the soldiers. Those little books were the Venezuelan Constitution, the Constitution of the Bolivarian Revolution that all of the people of Venezuela contributed to. So these folks, these working class and poor and working Venezuelans, were reminding these Venezuelan soldiers, this is our Constitution. Whoever is behind this, and we know it's the U.S., we know it's the Yankees, they are violating our Constitution. Would you let this stand? How can you let this stand? So the people in Venezuela shamed the Venezuelan military so much that the members of the Venezuelan military realized, wait a minute, we are doing the bidding of imperialists, the very imperialists that we kicked out. We need to go. So as this is going on, the people who were guarding Chavez, also members of the Venezuelan military, they were beginning to doubt what they were doing. They're holding Chavez, they're guarding him in some location, and Chavez begins to talk to them. And he's reminding him of the same thing that the people are reminding the guards at the presidential palace. So the guards, of course, begin to be like, all right, this is whack. This is crazy. You go ahead and write a note, because what'll happen is, if you write a note and put it in the trash can, one of us will take it from the trash can and make sure it gets to the media. This is what the Venezuelan guards, the military who were guarding Chavez, realizing on the inside now that they were doing the bidding of the imperialists, and they gave Chavez an opportunity to alert the press. They were going to help him alert the press, to let the press know that he was fine, that he was alive. And that's how the coup was overturned. He did exactly what the young guard told him to do, wrote a note. And this is the famous note that is shown in the museum, where Chavez says, I, Hugo Chavez, am the duly elected president of the Bolivarian Revolutionary State of Venezuela, am alive. I am still president. And one of the guards does take it from the trash can, take it outside of the facility where Chavez was held, shows it to another soldier. Another soldier's like, oh my God, he is alive. And that's how the information gets to people's communication networks, because the people were also so pissed off at the right wing for taking over the television networks, that they went to the television station with axes and they cut the communications cables. So all of the right wing people who were trying to lie on television, the Venezuelan people were like, we shutting them lies down. And they made it so that they could not broadcast lies to the people of Venezuela because they cut off they literally cut off the communications of the networks that had been taken over by the right wing. So you don't learn any of that. You do not learn any of that in the United States. Didn't learn it in 2002. You're not learning now as the US government continues its antagonism and attacks against Venezuela. You don't know how long this country and this government, under every president in both parties, have been actively trying to overthrow the Bolivarian government. Attempted coups have happened before, and they weren't done in a polite way. Kidnapping a president is not a polite thing to do. So the fact that this administration is murdering people with military weaponry in the sea is really no different from all of the other things that this government has done to Venezuelans. That 40,000 people that Cloud mentioned, that's the result of the sanctions imposed on Venezuela by the US government and upheld or added to by every administration. That's 40,000 Venezuelans dead because of those sanctions. What's different now with what this administration is doing, other than they're just killing people directly? They're not killing people as an indirect result almost of sanctions, but they still kill people with those sanctions, and they knew they were killing people with those sanctions because they understood, just like they understood with Cuba, that because of the sanctions, Venezuela had a hard time importing food, medicine, and other supplies that people needed. So the Venezuelan government had to increase in some way their efforts at providing food for their people, because unlike Nicaragua, Venezuela is not food sovereign, unfortunately.
They have gotten there because of
right.
the sanctions. They've moved to about 90+%. So
now they have,
yeah,
but it was those sanctions,
right.
And the murder of and 40,000, that is an underestimation.
Yeah,
but it was the murder of tens of thousands of Venezuelans through US sanctions that pushed Venezuela to become more food sovereign. So this is all of the stuff that, people are looking at what's going on now, that the Trump administration is doing in Venezuela as, the worst thing. And then, murder is awful. Yes, it's awful that they're murdering these people. We do need to understand, though, that this is just the latest iteration of the exact same actions that have been carried out against Venezuela by this government for decades, ever since the Bolivarian Revolution won, basically. So,
no, appreciate that, Jackie. I didn't. That was great to hear about the 2002, and that there's even a museum to that. I think that's also where you see the beginning of such a strong like military and civic union, right? That made the Bolivarian Revolution like possible, honestly. And even so that was what, over 20 years ago, 23 years ago, right? Fast forward those 23 years, now you have millions of civilians joining militias, right? Millions, over 50 million, I think is the number I read.
Yeah.
That's not nothing.
It is not, especially when I also witnessed that they celebrate what they call Military Day, and that's weird for somebody like, coming from the United States, is they celebrating this fucking imperialist, warmongering, blood shedding machine. They celebrating the U.S. military, but military in a revolutionary country, police in a revolutionary country is a different thing.
Right, right.
So
That's
yeah,
why
so
I never wear my like ACAB shirts when I go to Cuba or something. Because I'm like, no, 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 I love them.
right. We have to be clear about that.
Yeah,
Like,
exactly.
yeah, so I'm watching this Military Day parade, and I'm feeling away, and I see that it's not just a celebration of the Venezuelan military, but it is a celebration of the civic military alliance. The fact that the military defended the revolution. Even as at first they were caught up in this imperialist plot, but they were reminded by the people that no, this is your revolution. You came from us. You are us. You don't work for them. You work for us. What is wrong with you? And that, you're right. That is exactly where that strong civic military alliance comes from, because then more involvement, more military service was engaged in among the people. Right. So Military Day in Venezuela is a celebration of the reversal of the 2002 coup, but it is also a reflection of the fact that the military is the people.
Right.
The police is the people. Right. So back in 2022, I'm standing there looking at millions of Venezuela. I mean, millions, as far as the eye could see. And the first in line were the militia members
Mm-hmm.
from the neighborhoods that were formed partially to defend, to overturn that coup, but were also holdovers from the revolutionary struggles to establish the Bolivarian government. We see the members of the military, the members of the police, and we see all of these. The militias were so incredibly diverse. There were militias full of senior citizens. There were militias full of women. There were, militias with women and men, intergenerational militias. There were Afro Venezuelans all over the place.
Yes.
There were what are the I thought this was really cool, because this was a guerrilla unit militia that you couldn't see their face because they were the guerrilla. So they had the whole ghillie suit on, and it was like 200 of them, and it was like, damn. And they're all participating in this revolutionary celebration of resistance. And one of them, I'll never forget, one of them, because we are all standing on, these big, the raised daises around the stage, because we're guests, we're a part of the delegation. And one of the members of the guerrilla militia was kind of looking up at the people on the stands, and he caught my eye, and I threw up a fist, and he threw up a fist back, and I'm like, okay, this is a different thing. This is not the same as the military in an imperialist country. This is not the same as a militia in the US. This is not the same as the police in the US. These are the people of this country, and they are involved in these activities to defend their people and their country from US imperial and Western imperialism. That's the difference.
Yeah, I remember when I was in Bolivia, this past time around last month. one of the folks there was Venezuelan indigenous leader Noeli Bocaterra, one of the most important indigenous leaders that was in all the constituent assemblies, a major part of rewriting the Constitution, right? And she spoke about meeting Chavez for the first time and having to be convinced that someone from the military was going to take indigenous concerns seriously, right? Someone from the state was going to, and she was told, no, 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 no. This cat is different. He's one of ours. Like, he's also indigenous, right? He's Afro-indigenous. Like, you should meet him. You should meet him. He let me know what you think, right? She wasn't necessarily convinced at first, but then when she does eventually meet him, it is one of those situations where she's like, he spoke to me as a person, the first time that any military person had ever spoken to me as a person. And little by little, the way he spoke to me, the way he spoke to everyone in the community, like, he did win us over. But that, just the fact that there was such a rarity, right? That they were like, wait, someone from the military actually thinks that we're like humans and
Right.
like and are willing to consult us to be a part of the coalition. Like, that's, obviously the way she spoke about it was much more, I could listen to her speak for hours. But it was really interesting the way that even she described it as like, the military was never that for us until we understood it was our military. It was our revolution, right? It was our people defending that.
Yeah, yeah, and so this is why, for people who know this history about Venezuela and the people of Venezuela, this is why we are like, okay, you fuck around if you want to. I'm not saying that what the U.S. will do, plans to do, wants to do, won't be devastating to Venezuela and to the Venezuelan people. I'm just saying it's not going to be as easy as they think. It's not going to be a cakewalk. It's not going to be shock and awe
No,
for the Venezuelan people. I think it would be
no.
shock and awe for the U.S.
Right.
And
Right.
it is not. It's not something I want anybody to find out.
Right.
But that history is very important in understanding who the U.S. is trying to mess with right now.
Yeah. No, it's extremely important. Absolutely. I think that, I mean, all of the coup attempts in that country for the past 2 decades, I mean, they are gonna fuck around and find out. I mean, the folks joining the militias, you know, I like see on the whether it's like Telesur or other news agencies posting, right, like training videos of them where they're like singing like, we're gonna be your next Vietnam. I'm like, bro, these people are happily waiting for the Yankees to kick their ass.
Oh my gosh. It just this and it's interesting that we're having this conversation in the context of so much fuckery going on in the government right now. Like, these people are not, I say all the time, they're dangerous, yes. They're crafty, yes, but they're not rocket scientists. Do you know what I mean? They're not. It's like, I wouldn't call them stupid because they listen, they strategized to get to this point and
Right.
y'all didn't pay any attention. So
Right.
they had to have some kind of smarts to
Mm-hmm.
get past all of y'all. And because I guess ignoring us made it easy. But I mean, so they got to this point, and they were able to organize and strategize based on lies and hate. Yes,
Mm-hmm.
that's true.
Mm-hmm.
But they were still able to organize and strategize over the decades
Yeah.
consistently without ceasing to get to this point. So they're not stupid people. They're not dumb, but a lot of common sense, no, they don't have.
I mean, Mouse said it best. They're paper tigers.
Yes, they are. I mean, because when we look at where's this article that I just saw this morning, um, which I find interesting because listen, these are the same people who are always talking about the Constitution, the rule of law, law and order, rules based order, blah, blah, law, order, law. Really? So if law and order is a big deal, why are they trying to charge Senator Kelly with sedition or what is it, treason,
Treason, yeah.
for saying that military members should and can disobey illegal orders? Because that really is like the law, isn't it? Isn't it supposed to be like you if you believe that an order is illegal, then you have no obligation to follow it. And you can assert, and if orders violate your personal ethics, then you can assert conscientious objector status. I thought they're supposed to be able to do that. Then how come Hegseth is talking about potential punishments for Senator Kelly in confrontation over illegal orders video? So CNN says that Secretary of Defense Pete Secretary, it's funny that they're not calling it what they renamed it, like it matters. It doesn't make any difference. They've always done the same thing, and it was originally called the Department of War. But Secretary of War / Defense Pete Hegseth has been highly critical of the 6 Democratic lawmakers who released a video last week urging military service members to disobey illegal orders, calling the lawmakers the seditious 6. Oh, that is really weird. That is very weird because I'll tell you in a minute. Okay, and categorizing their messages as despicable, reckless, and false. That criticism has particularly focused on Senator Mark Kelly, the member of the group who had the longest tenure in the military. So Kelly served in the military. If anybody knows military law, it's him. So, and who achieved the highest rank of captain in the Navy. Hegseth has attacked Kelly by name, unlike the other lawmakers. He mocked Kelly for a picture of him in uniform. This man was in the military. And what was Hegseth in? The National Guard. Anyway, Hegseth mocked Kelly for a picture of him in the uniform. You can't even display your uniform correctly. And wrote that Kelly's conduct brings discredit upon the armed forces and will be addressed appropriately. This is from the guy who just directed the Department of Defense to no longer recognize the swastika and the noose as divisive symbols. And they got so much pushback that they had to scrap that idea. So yeah, they're not rocket scientists. They're just strategically very committed to what they do believe. So the article goes on to say that behind closed doors, Hegseth is weighing his options to punish Kelly for participating in the video, ones that range from reducing the retired U.S. Navy captain's rank and pension to prosecuting him under military law, according to a source familiar with the matter. In Kelly, Hegseth sees a critic worth making an example of, and he could technically use the military justice system to do so, the source said. Unlike the other 5 Democrats who appeared in the video, Kelly is a military retiree, meaning he served long enough to receive a pension and thus is still beholden to the Uniform Code of Military Justice, or the UCMJ, including its restrictions on free speech. So, when people say that the military practices socialism, stop it. They don't. the military is not even a free sub-society within an unfree, undemocratic society of the United States. The military has restrictions on conduct and speech of its members and punishments for these things that American civil society doesn't even have. So no, the U.S. military does not offer or practice socialism for its members just because it provides health care and housing that is not, by the way, free. Kelly could be recalled to active service and court-martialed because of that status, but doing so over his role in the video would be extraordinary, legal experts said. That's because not only has the UCMJ mainly been used in recent years to prosecute former service members who commit crime overseas outside of U.S. civil jurisdiction, but also because Kelly is a U.S. senator. Prosecuting him would raise unprecedented separation of powers issues, with the executive branch going after someone in the legislative branch. And Rachel E. Van Landingham, a national security law expert and former active duty judge advocate in the U.S. Air Force, said it would be an uphill battle for the administration, Van Landingham and other legal experts said, in large part because Hegseth's public statements deriding Kelly's video appear to be a clear-cut case of unlawful command influence, in which a superior commander implies or dictates a predetermined outcome for a military trial and thus makes a fair hearing impossible. Because everyone in the Defense Department works for Hegseth, Van Landingham noted, it's hard to see who could fairly convene a court to hear his case. Hegseth has completely tainted this process, Van Landingham said. A coalition of former and retired military judge advocates has also issued a rare joint statement. They normally do not talk to the public, warning that the Pentagon's effort to recall Kelly for UCMJ prosecution is partisan in nature, legally baseless, and compromised by unlawful command influence. We are confident the unlawful influence reflected in the press reports will ultimately disqualify all convening authorities except possibly the president himself from actually referring a case for court-martial, the statement said. In various public messages, Hegseth has suggested Kelly's comments violated several statutes of the UCMJ, which lays out legal requirements for those in the military, but they don't seem to cohere to a single theory of the case, legal experts said. So I'm going to drop this in the chat for you so you can read the rest of it. But basically, Hegseth, while he may not know military law and the law in general, because he's a dope head. Look, I'm sorry. I don't judge. I don't judge. You know, I don't judge because I understand that addiction is a disease. But some people are dicks before they even pick up a drug, right? And Hegseth is one of those people. You can't tell me that man is not on something. He is too hype. He is on speedballs every day. Coffee, speedballs are his coffee. I'm convinced. You can't tell me that it's not.
That dude is coked up.
He is,
for
yeah.
sure.
He is tweaking a lot.
Yep.
So
he's getting that shit straight from Noboa.
So this man having an opinion on military anything makes no sense. Thank you, Yipper, Red Bulls, and Coke. That's how he wakes up. That's the best part of waking up in the morning for him. So he was in the National Guard. As far as I remember, he was not full active duty military. And if you saw, I think there was a video of him trying to work out with active duty military. He couldn't even do pull-ups. And this is the same man who just rescinded the fitness requirements to change them to make them the best requirements for men, right? He couldn't even meet the requirements that he set for. This is the person who is talking about what Senator Kelly said is treason, that it's wrong to tell military members of the military that they should not obey illegal orders, while intellectually this is idiotic. Ideologically, this is incredibly strategic, because this is a threat to members of the military. That's what he's doing this for. He knows he doesn't have any real legal standing to do this. He knows he's not going to be able to recall Mark Kelly and court martial him for this video. He knows that the military is not going to do this. But he does know that the fact that he is willing to try is enough to keep some members of the military, not all, but some members of the military afraid of the repercussions enough that they will continue to go along with the illegal orders that they have been issuing, right? Because like we've been saying, people have not been disobeying these orders to murder these Fisher people. In the camp, somebody is pushing the button, and it's not just one person. We don't understand how the military. It's not, everything is not done by drone warfare. It's not all warfare by a joystick. There are entire teams that relay information to other members of the teams before a strike is even carried out. All of these people participated in these actions. So for members of the government, in whatever limited way they are acting, reminding members of the military, you can disobey illegal orders. That is within your right as a citizen, and within a military context, there is precedent for that. They know that is a legally sound thing to say, but legality is not what they're looking for. They're not looking to be affirmed in the court of law. He's not even really looking to punish Mark Kelly. He's looking to frighten the members of the military, those non-commissioned officers, those the enlistees. He knows that this is going to frighten them enough to keep them following these illegal orders.
Right. And I believe he is in the Dominican Republic today. Mm-hmm. And as Ricky also mentioned in the chat, she's not on the screen because her internet's not working, but she sure is in the chat. Dan Kane is also in Trinidad and Tobago, who advises Trump on war. Right, so they are clearly continuing to escalate, right, using these, puppet regional governments in mm-hmm. in the region. But yeah,
mm-hmm. Yeah, and for that story, several top U.S. military officials are in the Caribbean. And this was reported by the Associated Press. Top U.S. military officials are meeting leaders of Caribbean nations this week as the Trump administration has escalated its firepower in the region as part of what it calls a campaign against drug trafficking. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth will travel to Santo Domingo, Dominican Republic, and meet Wednesday with the country's top leaders, including President Luis Abinader, Minister of Defense Lieutenant General Carlos Antonio Fernandez Onofre, and other officials, the Pentagon said yesterday. The announcement came the same day that General Dan Kane, chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff and President Donald Trump's primary military advisor, met with Trinidad and Tobago Prime Minister Kamala Persad Bissessar. I almost called her that other word. I'm sorry. I'm going to try to work on that. But they exchanged views on challenges affecting the Caribbean region, including the destabilizing effect of illicit narcotics, arms, and human trafficking, and transnational criminal organizing organization activities, according to a summary released by Kane's office. None of that has anything to do with Venezuela, and she knows damn well it don't. The U.S. military has built up its largest presence in the region in generations and has been attacking alleged drug smuggling boats since early September. Not boats, people. To date, the military under Hegseth's command has carried out 21 known murders of Venezuelan and Caribbean fisherfolk accused of carrying drugs, killing at least 83 people. The actions are seen by many as a pressure tactic to get Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro to step down. The visits by Hegseth and Kane this week come as Trump evaluates whether to take military action against Venezuela, which he has not ruled out, despite raising the possibility of talks with Maduro, who has been charged with narco-terrorism in the U.S. What does that mean? That Chavez Maduro has been charged with narco-terrorism in the U.S.
Yeah, no, he hasn't been charged.
What does that mean?
That's an insane claim.
That doesn't mean anything.
No. I mean, they did officially, quote unquote, designate the Cartel de los Soles as a terrorist organization and allege that Maduro is the leader of said terrorist organization, right? But I mean, this has been out for some time now. I forget I think it's a 60-minute reel. We just posted on Black Alliance for Peace's Instagram, the Haiti Americas team, carousel of the last 20 years of the war against Venezuela, in which I think it is a clip from 60 Minutes, one of the news channels, talking about how the Cartel de Soles is actually a CIA operation, right? That prior to the Chavez government, the sellout government or military, I forget the name of the military official, who was essentially the U.S.'s Washington's man on the inside, the military patches had like a sun on them, so that's where the name comes. Literally, that's where the name comes from, right? So it's their own cartel, right? And then our guest is going to come on in about 5 minutes or so. But speaking, and she's from Ecuador, and we'll be discussing all things Ecuador in a few. But right, if you wanted to go to the source of the narco trafficking, it's in Guayaquil, it's in Ecuador, and it's through the Noboa's family. The family's owned ports. Noboa's family owns ports in Guayaquil, and then through their trading company, right? I forget which European country it was that recently seized something like 20 tons of cocaine heading to Europe from Guayaquil, right? So if you want to talk about, right, narco trafficking, it's right there. So it's not that's obviously not the issue, right? But a few years ago, particularly when the Lima group was actually active and trying to impose deadly sanctions, the excuse was the migration crisis, right? So whether the narrative is around crime or narco trafficking, or whether it's around migration, even though both don't look at the root causes of these things, right? Sanctions, military interventions, right? Like just U.S. interventionism in as a whole. They don't look at the root causes of this, but they're looking at whatever excuse fits the narrative of the day in order to move the same objectives, right? I just dropped, and we can go over this real quick before our guest comes on, but The Intercept just did, they went through some, I guess some of the like documents, right, that's talking about all of the recent Pentagon moves, and it seems that it's indicating that the plan is to keep troops in the Caribbean through at least 2028, right? So we've spoken about this before in terms of, they the U.S. just needs forever wars, right?
Mm-hmm.
The military industrial complex just needs wars, whether it's against internally colonized populations, whether it's in Palestine, whether it's in Venezuela and the Caribbean at large. The U.S. needs consistent forever wars, right? So you can see here, right? The Intercept look through some of the documents, particularly around food supplies, right?
Mm-hmm.
For the because you could kind of tell what they are planning based on them needing to feed a bunch of troops that they're planning on keeping there, right? Right now, the force is up to 15,000 troops in the Caribbean since the summer. Those
Mm-hmm.
numbers are probably really low, actually, if you consider Caribbean countries that have troops in them that aren't being counted again in this particular deployment, right? So, like
Mm-hmm.
U.S. troops in Haiti, for example, right? That could be easily diverted towards these efforts. Um, so, I mean, yeah, this is U.S. imperialism, U.S.
Mm-hmm.
forever wars. They don't even need to win, right? I,
No.
I think they know they're not going to win.
Yes, because winning is not a part of it. I don't even know that the word winning is even used in their planning and strategy sessions anymore. It's about, they will say things like stabilization, influence, and the nebulous partnership. Partnership always means control. It's occupation basically. um but let's read this a little bit, what the Intercept said in this article. Let me make sure our guest isn't here yet. So they say that the United States is formulating plans to feed a massive military presence in the Caribbean almost to the end of President Donald Trump's term in office, suggesting the recent influx of American troops to the region won't end anytime soon. As gossip, official leaks, and rumant, a portmanteau of rumor and intelligence, about a coming war with Venezuela reign in Washington, Defense Department contracting documents, you always find out the truth from the Department of Defense contracts. Always. Department of Defense contracting documents reviewed by The Intercept offer one of the most concrete indications of the Pentagon's plans for operations in the Caribbean Sea over the next 3 years. The contracting documents earmark food supplies for almost every branch of the U.S. military, including the Coast Guard, Army, Navy, Air Force, and Marine Corps. They detail an effort by the Defense Logistics Agency, DLA, to source, quote, fresh bread and bakery products to Department of Defense, DOD, or troop customers in the Puerto Rico zone. One spreadsheet outlining supplies for Puerto Rico troops notes tens of thousands of pounds of baked goods are scheduled for delivery from November 15th of this year to November 11th, 2028. The Pentagon has built up a force of 15,000 troops in the Caribbean since the summer, the largest naval flotilla in the Caribbean since the Cold War. That continent now that contingent now includes 5,000 sailors aboard the USS Gerald R. Ford, the Navy's newest and most powerful aircraft carrier, which has more than 75 attack, surveillance, and support aircraft. So, y'all, um, if you
Right.
ever want to find out what the Department of Defense is really doing, find the contracts that they've already signed and allocated money to produce services for. Don't believe what they say. Look at their paper trail.
Mhm.
That contract is already signed. That
Yeah.
contract is already in force.
And to Erica's point in the chat, this bill was under Biden to combat China's influence in the region, right, from 2021. So again, they have a bunch of plans cooked up for various reasons, right? But whether they deploy them at what time and for what exact reasons. They can just shift around. Um, but this has been something that they've been planning for quite some time. I think, especially when it comes to quote unquote combating China, right? The Caribbean literally connects east to west when it comes to global commerce routes. So
Mm-hmm.
if you essentially bottleneck that area, you control global commerce, right?
That's
Which
right.
is why it's so geostrategically important. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. But hey, y'all, thank you so much for joining us here on the Remix Morning Show on Women's Wednesday. No ear doctor today. So sorry, but you've got Jackie Lukman and Clau O'Brien Moscoso, and we also have a guest. So let's get into this interview. Let's go, y'all. Hello, hello. Welcome back. I'm Jackie. This is Cloud, and we are joined by a special, fantastic, wonderful comrade. Cloud, take it away.
Yes, please, peace, comrades. We have one of our wonderful comrades here, who, much like me, splits their time between the global South and the global North. I'm sure you experience, whiplash every time you come back. I always say that it's like going back in time because the struggles are so advanced in the global South, despite the poverty, despite all of this, right? But the struggles are so advanced that when you come back to the U.S., it just feels very disjointed. Did we
Mhm.
lose our guest just now?
Yeah, I think we lost her for a minute, and that's okay. We'll
Okay.
be right here, and they are back.
Okay, there we go.
All right.
I'm so
um,
sorry about that.
no, no,
No,
no.
no worries.
Good. It's all good. So yeah, just maybe if you can introduce yourself, I'm sure folks can understand. I should probably do this too, but
Too
um,
late now.
yeah, it's too late now. My face and name are out there, but I'm sure folks can understand if you're in between narco dictators and U.S. imperialism. You kind of want to be a little bit, safe. So we're not,
Mhm.
we're going to be able to hear and enjoy the musings of our comrade. But yeah, if you want to introduce yourself, where you're at now, and maybe if you can start us off with the recent popular consultation in Ecuador, what those 4 questions were and the results.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for having me on the platform. I want to begin just by asking if my audio is okay. Do I sound clear? Okay, wonderful. Because if needed, I can plug in a mic. It's just I have a couple different ports going on here. And but it sounds like it's all good, right?
Yep, all good. Sound great. Loud and clear.
Wonderful. Um, So yeah, thank you again for giving me and my comrades an opportunity. Yes, as you know, to share a little bit about both the general strike, the consequences of it, the wins, and the electoral victory that the Ecuadorian pueblo showed through a historic blow to U.S. imperialism a little bit over a week ago now. Um, so yeah, and thank you also for protecting my anonymity. Folks can follow updates on via around the political landscape and the ongoing worker anti-imperialist struggle in Ecuador and across Latin America via my Twitter, Soviet Westazón, where I have been sharing and reporting, covering the paro nacional that just occurred in Ecuador, and the struggle which continues. Um, so yeah, I am asking for anonymity just because I have also had some issues coming back from Cuba and China with the Customs and Border Patrol asking questions around political work. So thank you again for affording me that. But there are ways for folks to follow our work. I'm a member of a Latin American Marxist coalition that has supported and engaged with the Colombian general strike of 2021, and also with the Paro Nacionals, the general strikes of Ecuador, in both 2019 and 2022. Personally, my experiences with organizing anti-imperialist labor and land struggles, political prisoner campaigns, tenant union work, and undocumented worker struggles, and of course, solidarity with both Palestine and the anti-imperialist alliances across the Americas, which are so critical to the liberation of all working people. Um, and I'm Ecuadorian. Come from a communist family in Ecuador that has, many of my elders have faced a repression. Some of them had to be given asylum by the Cuban Revolution because of the state repression in Ecuador that continues till today. So a lot of my reporting follows that, and particularly right now, to give an overview, as Clau asked, the last 6 months in Ecuador have been the most dangerous and deadly period in the nation's history. The results of a US backed military regime, and no, that's not it's not an oxymoron. Although the U.S. likes to position itself as the opponent of the cartel economy, it is its biggest exporter and funder, and they have hijacked a once democratic socialist nation through the neoliberal privatization of the state. Through the granting of blanket immunity to US soldiers operating within its borders, the revoking of our right to due process, a state of war decree under which 4 Black boys as young as 11 years old were kidnapped, tortured, shot, and then burned to death by 17 soldiers. The patrolling of our elections by Blackwater mercenaries, the defunding of healthcare, education, and indigenous protections, um, the exclusion of over 50% of the nation's workforce from its formal economy, IMF austerity measures, which actually laid off like around 5,000 public workers this summer. Um, and then, of course, the proven collusion between multinational corporations and the cartel economy, including the president's own family, a billionaire company, which has, and all of this combined has caused the country to spiral from once the second safest in the nation to now the number one most dangerous, with the second highest rate of child hunger and 5 out of the world's 10 most dangerous cities. All of this is with the intention, of course, of creating a crisis so dire that it manufactures, public consent for a militarized U.S. puppet state. This has been continuously the playbook that the United States has used across Latin America. We see this in Plan Colombia. And of course, in the ongoing context right now, this manufacturing of public consent um, will in turn, of course, be used as a pawn for the growing war on Venezuela. And I'm very grateful to, be involved in the work that Clau is leading around and mobilizing around the Zona de Paz. And, we just had that week of action with Solidarity, which I want to shout out. But yeah, like then Senator, now U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio confirmed back in 2023 under the National Defense Authorization Act that Ecuador is its most strategic and pro American partner in a sea of openly socialist nations who would help the United States develop resilience against state and non state enemies, right? So that's very clear in what all of this repression is not just serving domestic interests. Of the bourgeoisie and the compradors and U.S. imperialist nations within Ecuador, but very similar to how Colombia has been weaponized the past 20 years, or actually longer. Ecuador is also turning into a military pawn. Um, but yeah, as Clau was saying, like this past week, or on the 16th, November 16th, Sunday, the Ecuadorian people, proved Marco Rubio wrong. They said, no, we will not be your most strategic, partner after a month-long general strike that had started in September. led primarily by indigenous workers and campesinos, which shut down commerce routes and mining projects, major highways, and entire cities for over 30 days to protest this US backed military regime. A popular referendum was put to a nationwide vote with four questions. These are the ones that Clau was referencing, um, and on which the country's sovereignty really hung. The questions were around whether to build a new U.S. military base after Ecuador successfully ousted them altogether in 2009 under a democratic socialist president. The second was whether to dissolve the constitution, which the Ecuadorian people ratified in the 2008 Montecristi Constitution. Um, Whether to privatize elections by eliminating all public funding for campaigns, which makes the participation of working class candidates possible, right? And so Daniel Noboa, our current US backed puppet, and American citizen, I might add, he is like the OG Gusano because he's born and raised in Miami. And reports to them directly. He benefits from that, right? Because he's the son of the richest man in Ecuador. And so he can fund his own public campaign. Meanwhile, the indigenous presidential candidates, the working class presidential candidates need to rely on public funding, which he was seeking to eliminate. And finally, he also wanted to downsize our Congress to model a more American structure of government, again, reporting to his homeland of the United States. Um, but in response, millions of Ecuadorians delivered a historic blow, as I said, to US imperialism. They blocked each and every proposal by President Daniel Noboa. Um, and even with the power of the State Department behind him, Ecuadorians, told him the richest man in Ecuador, no, 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 right? Essentially, telling him, vete la verga, vende patria. Sorry, not to. I'm not sure if I can cuss on here, but I just want to, it
Yes,
was
please.
word. But yeah, they sent him running. They literally, his first public appearance after this nationwide referendum was in the United States for a confidential meeting with Washington, right? And so he has, up until yesterday, had not provided a public appearance in Ecuador, making it very clear that that is who he reports to, not his constituency, right? And so, yeah, I'm in this moment, it's clear that he is once again, as he has multiple times in violating constitutional and international law, finding a way around respecting it and the word of the Ecuadorian people. But I still feel incredibly proud of my compas that even under a state of war decree that allows the army to raid and kidnap anyone they deem an enemy of the state, uh, even after there's been, over 30 confirmed cases, I think actually now 43 by of political disappearances, as even documented by Amnesty International, which I think most organizers know, tends to favor U.S. imperialist agendas sometimes. And so the fact that they even are confirming this shows how dire of a situation, Um, even after the military murdered three of our comrades at the general strike, even after they seized the bank accounts of the indigenous activists leading the strike, even after they censored and suspended TV channels for covering our strike, citing them as collaborators of terrorists and national security threat, because again, under this state of war decree, they can deem anyone who's an enemy of the state a terrorist and revoke their constitutional rights. Even after hundreds of prisoners have been massacred, even after they burned our children to death, right? Even after they had Eric Prince and his mercenary goons, formerly of Blackwater. I'm not sure what PR name they're spinning it with now, but they had him posted up to intimidate voters at the last election. And yet, with all of this pressure and repression, the Ecuadorian people still did not kneel to Daniel Noboa. And so I just have a lot of gratitude for my compas. And what they mobilized, and I just want to end by giving gratitude to Rosa Elena Paqui, Efrain Fuertes, and Jose Waman, indigenous leaders who gave their life to this struggle during the general strike when they shouldn't have had to. This this progress, this victory in a long struggle is for them, and because of them.
Yeah, no, thank you so much for that sort of deep background. I wonder also, I guess, with this blow, right, to the plans that Noboa had. Um, what do you even though this was, a victory for the people at the electoral site, right? What do you think comes next? Because I'm sure, being under state of emergency in early last year, January 2024, much like Peru, and I wonder, this would be a very interesting compare and contrast, right? Because I see a lot of similarities, especially when Noboa um, declares an internal armed war, right? So in the 80s, Peru was under an internal armed war that the numbers, very low numbers, are at least 70,000 killed. And to this day, we're still finding unmarked graves, right? Which really was like a Plan Condor, right? Like a truly an anti-communist purge. So I wonder, even though the Ecuadorian people did give Noboa and the U.S. a blow at the election site, what does come next? Because I think we understand that folks like this are not just going to go away and, oh, okay, well, we do respect democracy. I guess we're just going to pack it up, right?
No, absolutely. The material conditions on the ground, unfortunately, have not changed. Noboa is still in power. There is still a state of forces agreement between the U.S. State Department and the Ecuadorian government, which allows the U.S. military to not only occupy our airspace, our highways, our commerce routes, what else? Our maritime, like our ocean and coast, which unfortunately could be used if this growing war on Venezuela escalates even further. Um, and then also there's, the natural resource industries, which were previously nationalized, and or many of whom were previously nationalized, have now been handed back to the hands of U.S. capitalists. Um, and on top of that, daily life for Ecuadorians is incredibly dire. And as I mentioned, we are the nation with the second highest rate of child hunger. We are one of the most dangerous countries in all of the Americas, and that 90,000, that those conditions have displaced internally over 90,000 Ecuadorians, and furthermore created a huge wave of migration to the United States, wherein many undocumented migrants have to weather a very unsafe trip, crossing the hawkish U.S. military border. Um, and particularly under this escalation of mass deportations, are facing incredibly dire working conditions when they arrive to the United States. And so um, and in back home, the diesel subsidy, which was slashed, which is what really was the final straw that broke the camel's back, and initiated this last general strike. Unfortunately, it remains. Of course, this general strike led to the Consulta Popular, and that is in representation of where the Ecuadorian pueblo, the people, stand. But unfortunately, it was called off, much to the dismay and in opposition to what the rank and file worker groups on the ground had decided. They wanted to continue, but the leadership struck a deal essentially behind their back with the Noboa administration, out of the fear, understandable fear, of the U.S. backed military regime, but certainly not a way to respond to the escalation of a dictatorship, really. And so this has also, of course, taken the highest toll on rural people, Black and Indigenous groups. the working class, and also children. We have had a 640% raise in child murder. The cases of missing people has I think it's doubled or tripled, and young girls as young as 12 years old account for more than 70% of those missing cases. And so it's clear that there is a coordinated effort that the state is allowing to happen either negligently, or I would argue is directly complicit in. Many of these girls are suspected to have been trafficked by the cartel, which I would love to touch on the ties it has to Novoa's family. Because poor working class families in areas where these cartels have seized the economy have no choice but to, be intimidated into, letting these cartels essentially kidnap their children, and the still taxes were raised on working class people from 12 to 15%, despite Novoa's own family owing the government $98 million in tax debt. And these austerity measures of raising taxes, of slashing the diesel subsidy, are of course part of the IMF's impositions on the country. And particularly, I want to note that the IMF austerity measures, one of them was to close the Ministry of Security. I believe that's how you translate it to English, and like the Ministry of Justice, and it was handed over to the Ecuadorian military, and then also to the to exported to these American mercenary companies like Blackwater, right? And so the US claims to want to like build security in these regions, but it's very clear that by closing these governments, agencies, that's not their interest. In reality, they really want our country unsafe, so that they can then say you need to be under a state of war, an internal war, and that we need a militarized state to keep people safe. And it's very clear that under Novoa, nothing has become safer. And actually, now Ecuador, under him, has become the number one exporter of cocaine. And 70% of the cocaine distribution passes through Ecuador and goes to Europe and the United States. And so everything that he claims to stand against, he's actually complicit in. And part of that is all leading to the U.S., having unlimited power to operate within our borders, including in the Galapagos, where they are still building a military base. And so, yeah, I just, the material conditions have not changed, and that's why, la lucha sigue. But certainly, I think that this general strike shows that there will be a more militant response as they continue to escalate.
Yeah, no, thank you so much. Jackie, did you want to chime in?
Yeah, I am listening to the horrific material conditions that the people are having to navigate just for daily life, but they're also organizing and resisting in just an incredible way. And I hear Clow say all of the time that the struggle is advanced in the global South. What does that mean for you? How would you explain that to us outside of the global South as a way to guide us to how we should orient ourselves in our organizing to be more effective here? I think. What would you tell us about how our organizing can be more effective given the conditions that you all are organizing in? And as bad as things are here, it's nothing close to that. Or maybe we don't think it is. What would you say to us?
No, yeah, that's such an important question to explore. And I won't claim to have all the answers, but I one, I just want to say, because I have also, also organized in the United States, and um, I think it's really important sometimes the Americans, I'll hear them exceptionalize the state repression that they're under as an excuse for why they cannot arm a militant labor movement, a militant rebellion against the state. And I just want to say, as Clau pointed out, there have been mass scale purges and killings in Latin America, but not just there, in Indonesia, in the Arab regions, in Africa. And so you all are not alone, right? When I'm speaking to Americans, they're not alone, and that is unfortunately one of the risks of organizing. But Latin America has seen, right, in Argentina, under the quote unquote dirty war, which is a U.S. backed junta in which they killed, over 30,000 leftists. Many of them, actually, I like to plug this, is many of them were Jewish communists, and guess who helped them massacre those people? The Israeli occupational forces, right? They sent over $1 billion in military aid. So as this ongoing genocide of Palestinian people continues to be, justified as a way to protect Jewish Americans, I don't think that that should be the focus, right? The focus should always be on Palestinians, but I also think that it is incredibly ironic that the IDF claims this when they have been complicit in that. But sorry, to circle back, there's just there is, and we are not only under the repression of a police state, right, that is backed by our own nation's capitalist compradors, but also by U.S. military intervention and far less international observers, far less media attention. I imagine that most, I have looked and looked for international media covering the repression of the Noboa state, and it's very limited. Whereas when there is repression within the United States, even though bourgeois media often justifies it, there is still coverage. And so, I just want to say first, like the conditions, I don't think that's a fair excuse. One of the things that I think is so effective about the organizing in Latin America is people organizing around the points of production. So, for example, oil fields were shut down entirely by the collaboration between the indigenous campesinos whose land is being stolen from them to exploit for these oil extraction, but also the workers itself who see a shared interest with these indigenous people because they're being exploited by the same corporations in very different ways. Commerce routes, right? Like when Noboa first launched this diesel subsidy, which would the slashing of the diesel subsidy would make it far harder for the transportation of medical supplies, the transportation of food, the transportation of all these basic necessities, right? The response wasn't just to go to these points of like public office and protest, which is often what I see the strategy used in the United States, and that's important, right? Like you want to make your voice heard, but they were like, where do we actually wield power? And it's that these bourgeois systems rely on our labor to create their capital, to create their profit. And so if we say no, absolutely not, we will not, contribute to your profits unless you meet our demands. That is what has made the 2019 and the 2022 general strike in Ecuador possible, right? People shutting down commerce routes, people in the indigenous leaders in Otavalo, this past general strike, they gave a beautiful, inspiring speech where they said to their people, Otavalo is a historically indigenous a pueblo in Ecuador, and they said, nothing in the economy moves. Everything is put to a halt except for pharmacies and hospitals. The only things that keep people alive, that's the only thing that gets to run. Everything else, banks, taxis, grocery stores, everything else that moves capital is shut down, transportation. And so they joined arms with the truck drivers, with union workers, with the educators, with the students. And that's where the power is. And this is not just, it is not just spontaneous. There goes a lot of work into these strikes, right? The creation of mutual aid networks that can sustain people's livelihood during the strike because, they're withholding their employment. Um, the coordination of security, the way that different organizations like El Movimiento Indígena y Campesina del Cotopaxi is, they're in the north, they're coordinating with the south. I'm like, I'm joining like weekly national meetings in which people are sharing their strategies. There's consistent communication. There's consistent self-criticism as well and self-reflection. Every time there's an action, people are like, what were the victories? What were the areas where we were weak? What are the ways that we can improve? Looking to history for lessons. And also voicing disagreement when they feel that the leadership of these organizations is not fairly representing them, right? The CONAI, which is the largest indigenous federation in Ecuador and has been responsible for much of the militant resistance to right-wing governments in Ecuador, but unfortunately has also swayed in its political spectrum over the years, sometimes siding with Washington interests. And there are what is true of them, and very similar to like unions in the United States, right, where the leadership can be right wing, where the leadership can be bureaucratic, right? We saw what's his name, O'Brien of the Teamsters. He met with Trump, right? There's also union bureaucrats who meet with the Democrats and the DNC responsible for genocide and the exploitation of workers internally. And we see these union bureaucrats sell out their workers so many times. But I want to say to American workers, they don't have to represent you. You do not have to be accountable to them. You can have militant rank and file rebellions. You can resist them. And the Ecuadorian people did when CONAI didn't put a democratic decision about ending the strike, when they just announced it over social media without even giving their militant rank and file bases an opportunity to speak. These militant groups came forward in the hundreds across the country and held public, press conferences and said, no, we workers, we campesinos, we students, we're not represented by this decision, and the strike continues. And so yeah, I think those are some of the lessons that we can learn. And the other thing I'll just say is, and Black Alliance for Peace and the Zona de Paz are doing this work, but it's internationalist coordination, right? We cannot rely on only our nation's liberation struggle. We have to be coordinated because the bourgeoisie of our nations are, and so the working class of our nations must be too.
Bars, 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 and bars.
Thank you.
Internationalism always. Yeah. I'm curious if we can talk a little bit more about this split, I guess, if you will, in the leadership of CONAI and in the mass space of CONAI. Right. Because I remember, right, 4 minutes, we'll give you 4 minutes. Right. I remember, right, Marlon Vargas coming out saying that, very unfortunately we have to make this decision to end the strike. And then later that day, folks I think it was Imbabura, that were saying absolutely not. That was not popularly consulted. We still uphold the strike. So I wonder if you can speak a little bit more to maybe the class antagonisms within the leadership and the broader base, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, so I'll try to be quick because it sounds like we're down to the minute. But I think in a more general sense, yes, I think this is often also a representative of a larger pattern of professional organizers and their contradiction with then working class people who are involved in militant organizing struggle. And in general, there have been times where CONAI, I had mentioned, for example, they ran Yacu Perez, who's was an indigenous man of Cañar, who had legitimate criticisms of the former government of Correa. That was a democratic socialist government, which had cut poverty in half, which had, the highest wages, a minimum wage in all of Latin America during his time. He ousted the U.S. military bases. He expropriated a ton of our industries. He seized the central bank. He democratized media that was formerly all owned by corporate banks, and so he did a lot of progress for our nation. And also there were shortcomings that he had, particularly that most impacted indigenous working class groups. And as a result of that, there are members within CONAI who are very critical of him, and with all good reason. But we were faced an election between a right wing banker who was responsible for the 1990s economic crash, in which over 60% of Ecuadorians lost all their savings, right? Many of them lost their homes. And that, and a democratic socialist who was promising universal health care, reinstating the nationalization of several industries, promising $1,000 checks, which goes a long way in Ecuador to working class families. And in that, CONAI decided to, or I should say, a specific sector of CONAI, the Pachacutic party in particular, decided to run a candidate who was managed by his wife, Manuela Pic, who has worked for the Republican government of Florida, who was a member of the FTAA, the Trade Agreements Association that excludes Cuba and that is part of the embargo on Cuba. Who during the coup of Evo Morales was, while the US was invading Bolivia or supporting the invasion of Bolivia by right-wing forces and massacring indigenous people in the Sencata region, she gets on national TV and starts criticizing Evo Morales as a misogynist um, and just wielding, not a true anti-patriarchal position, but more of a bourgeois feminist critique. And so and also Yacu Perez himself, he said, I would prefer a banker over a dictator, which all communists know is a very common slander that U.S. State Department uses against these folks. And in response to this campaign, actually, many folks criticized the presidential campaign of Yacu Perez within CONAI itself, right? And so CONAI is, and one of them actually was Leonidas Issa, who warned that there were right-wing forces within Yacu Perez's campaign. And I just want to say that, Leonidas Issa represents, he is one of the leaders of the two successful general strikes in Ecuador, and he represents a militant anti-imperialist and, campesino movement that is accountable to the indigenous workers of Ecuador. And so there's these two sides of CONAI, and I think it's because it is primarily an identity-based organization. I don't say that disparagingly, it's just the reality is that it's around indigenous people, and there are various different class positions amongst the indigenous people of Ecuador. And it's very similar to the United States. It's kind of like a federation based on, like, I would say the most equivalent to the United States is like tribal law. So you have bourgeois indigenous people who are like, we'll protect our lands from, like, the more mestizo government, but we will not interrogate the class contradictions between the bourgeois indigenous people and the working class indigenous people. And you see those really come to a head in militant movements like a general strike. Like in those moments where everything is on the line, you see who sells out the quickest. And just like within mestizo and white communities, the same is true within marginalized ethnicities like indigenous people, where those class contradictions, it's always the bourgeoisie or the petty bourgeois who are the first to sell out. So sorry, I know that was quick, and I hope I was concise.
No, thank you so much. That was perfect. Thank you for coming on and sharing so much, honestly. We would love to have you back whenever possible, because there's so much, right? I think, yeah, Ecuador and Peru especially play such a strategic role, particularly when it comes to being off the Pacific and essentially readying the battlefield for an upcoming war with China, but then also internally towards the region as like stalwarts of the right wing, right? So yeah, I think thank you so much again, Jackie. Any other thoughts?
Absolutely.
No, that's it. This will definitely be clipped and shared around, and I will listen to it repeatedly
Yeah.
several times. Thank you so much.
Yes, I just want to say thank you again for giving me and my comrades this platform. And Clau, we gotta talk because I don't think I told you this, but I'm also Peruana. Mi mamá es peruana. Mi papá es ecuatoriano, pero mi mamá. So we
From
gotta
where,
connect.
ma'am? From where?
They're related. They're related.
Yeah. So, but thank you. It's just been such a pleasure talking with both of you. I feel so much solidarity and love. So, yeah. Thanks again.
Definitely. Absolutely.
Peace,
Thank you so
comrade.
much. I love it when the work we do puts us in contact with people who just affirm the importance and the beauty of the work we do. Like, organizing is wildly beautiful when you see it bring people together the way we do. When we do it right, when we do it right. And doing it right doesn't necessarily mean that we win all the time, but doing it right to me does mean that we bring people together, build community, and learn how to fight for each other together. That's
Mhm.
what doing it right means to me, and I think that is the only way we actually do win. I don't see us winning against these people in silos. I mean, that's how they. Because look, I got to tell y'all, writing this book, I think today I will finish. I will literally finish the first draft today,
Wow.
and I'm all emotional because I'm like, oh my god,
No,
I
that's your
did
baby.
it. Man, because I've been in here just head down, focused, ignoring other stuff. But having to do the research, having to really understand history that I thought I knew, but I really
Mhm.
did not know as much as I
Mhm.
thought I did, and
Mhm.
learning what I have learned and making the connections I have made. Like, y'all, the only thing the right wing has on us is they are organized.
Yeah.
That's it. That
Yeah.
is it. That is the only thing. And please, I understand that the right wing has a network of rich people. Yep, I get it. Yes, they have money. And now the right wing has control over basically the entire media apparatus of this country. Because if you don't believe that liberals are right wing, you haven't been listening or paying attention. Right?
Right. Yeah.
Looking at I was really thinking about this last night, Clau, as I was like wrapping up my last little, comments on the second to last chapter and reading over the last one. Like, if we had just if white people had just listened to John Brown, if they had just said, he got something there. I think, hmm,
This
I think
this
he's
white
got
boy's
something there. If just the white Christians had said, he's right. He's right. We might not want to do what he's doing, but he's right. We got to fight this thing. This has to end. This has to. If people who really were who they said they were, decent people, Christians, if they cared about democracy, if they cared about humanity, if at any time in the long history of repression and fascism in this country, those people, a small group of those people, had ever said, we have to stop this, and had continued that struggle against this system, we wouldn't be here. That is how deeply interconnected, and how I don't know the word I'm looking for, but that's how we're not where we are is not like something that we could not avoid. Do you understand what I'm saying? What is happening now was never like this thing that was too big for anybody to do anything about. There were plenty of times, repeatedly throughout history, when the conditions were ripe and the moral imperatives were clear, and white people in this country basically chose to ignore their morals, or they chose to actually be who they really were and stop lying about their morals. And people who saw it basically kept shaking their heads and saying, oh, that's too bad. And the only people who actually fought against it were Black people and Indigenous people and the people who were the most oppressed from those actions. And nobody listened to us. Nobody listened to us. Instead, what they did was get mad because we told them the truth about themselves. That's what happened. So we are in a situation now where everybody is living under this oppression because they just chose to look at the people who have pointed out to them repeatedly throughout history. We don't have to take this. This is wrong. They're eventually going to come for you. And instead of white people listening to those folks, white people said, shut them up, and sent the police and the military. And now they're having to deal with the police and the military. If collective action, cross-cultural solidarity, and people-centered organizing was what people engaged in this country to fight fascism, when people realized that's what it is and that this is wrong and the system is wrong, we wouldn't be here. But white supremacy rules in this country. White supremacy is the religion of this country, and they are organized around that religion. Capitalism is the religion of this country. They are organized around that religion. What the fuck is the left organized around?
Yeah. Yep.
I mean, I think I get to this point in my personal life, my organizing life, and just as a curious person who likes to know and learn stuff, I get to this point and I'm like, man, how badly did we fuck this up? like when we look at when our comrade was talking about criticism and self-criticism, I feel like one of the things that we have not done well as revolutionary Black radical tradition organizers, we haven't done an effective and strategically useful job of debriefing the shortcomings of previous struggles. And I understand that we've always been on the back foot. We've always been fighting the repression. We've always been protecting ourselves. But we have to be honest about why we're still fighting for voting rights after we won the civil rights laws. You know what I mean? Like we are not talking about why the things we won don't feel like victories, and how the victory was taken out of those things, the way our movements were co-opted, the way some of our people collaborated with people to weaken our movements for their benefit, for their personal benefit, right? The class antagonisms within our movements.
Yep.
That made it easier for this type of infiltration to happen, where you had, this issue where younger people after the civil rights movement saw the shortcomings of the civil rights legislation, and they were pointing out, y'all missed something. Y'all bougie ass Black folks missed something. Okay, we got integration, but we have no power because look at how we're living. Right? I don't think on this side, yes, the right out organized us, absolutely, because they've been on point, focused on their goal, and dedicated to the long-term battle. The right is dedicated to protracted struggle.
I was going to say, they actually understand protracted struggle.
They've been in protracted struggle for 400 years.
Literally.
And it's not just here. They are organized with the white right wing all around the world. All around the world, and they have been, even as they have gone to war with each other over little petty issues, but they sure as hell come back together and organize against us. They are invested in protracted struggle. We won't even talk to working class and poor and peasant organizers in other countries, because we still believe they got anti-blackness. While we do not pay attention to the lessons we need to learn from the things that we got wrong, that we are still perpetrating now, and we wonder why. Well, when people talking about, because people have commented in the chat about the Target strike and a general strike. How do you think that's going to happen in this country when we got folks listening to Cardi B speaking at the UN, believing that what she's saying is relevant, right? When we got folks listening to Jules Santana talking about kids need to learn how to start businesses, not how to read.
Oh, Lord. I mean, just listen to what the comrade said before, right? The leader of CONAI almost unilaterally ended the strike, and the masses said, no, you don't have the power. We got the power.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. I always confuse those two chicks. Nicki Minaj, not Cardi B. Sorry. I don't know why in my brain they're the same person, but you know what I mean.
You just started a whole other feud.
I know. That's my superpower. Intentionally, unintentionally starting feuds over pop culture issues.
Like, oh no, not Nicki being
Look, listen, I am a metalhead. That's my excuse. I don't care about these. Now, you misquote a metal song and attribute it to somebody else. We fighting because you don't know what you're talking about. But all this other stuff, I don't know about these people. But anyway. Oh man, 2 hours goes really fast when you're having fun.
It does.
And you don't have your overseer here.
I was just gonna say, especially when you don't have some random person making comments.
But hey, stuff happens, and as much as we can, the Remix Morning Show will go on. Ear Doctor is fine, just had conflict.
He partied a little too much.
Yeah, had a little bit too much fun last night. So yeah. I'm sure we shall see him again tomorrow. And until next week, I won't be back on until next week because I got to finish this thing this week and get it out the door so I can get part of my life back. Because then the edits come back, and that's going to be a whole nother few months of agony and anxiety. But here we are. But hey, thanks so much.
Yeah, I was just going to say, especially if it's a Jemima Pierre edit, that will take forever. Good Lord.
Jesus, just...
A writer hates to see Jemima come.
I'm thankful. I am thankful for her expertise, her and Margaret Kimberly, but damn,
Margaret's a wonderful. No, they're both wonderful editors, but like,
I mean, if you don't have confidence in yourself as a writer, don't send your shit to them.
Don't send
to edit it, because they will hurt your feelings. They put you, they send your stuff back, and it's basically like saying you cannot stop writing. You don't know what you're.
I was like, I thought I was feeling myself. God,
I know. And it's
like, no, what are you doing?
But you know what? That if you love to write, that is the best way to learn to write. Mm-hmm. It really, there's no way to do it other than to have somebody who is a better writer help you and show you how to write better, and that's the best way to do it. So. Yeah, thanks y'all so much for joining us here on the Remix Morning Show, Women's Wednesday. I'm Jackie Lukman. This is Clau O'Brien Moscoso. We are out. Let's see. Where's the thing? Let me hit the thing.
Where's the thing?
Okay, I always got to find the doggone outro. Okay, here we go. Peace, y'all.
Remix. remix, 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 remix.